I came here a couple of years ago, and there was a talk given by Dan Hammer's student Josh about the coast city, and I thought it was just terrific. And the only thing that struck me was what was missing from it was any notion of the concept of power. It was as if everybody could sit down and negotiate and everything would work out. But of course, if some major corporation wants to put a toxic waste dump near my house, I don't think that they would be likely to sit down and negotiate with me. And then David gave a talk a few days later at the History of Economics meeting, and it was about expertise, and you heard a little bit about his ideas of expertise, and it really got me thinking again, questioning my own thinking. Because what I really like about these is the mix of different ideas and how we can learn from one another. And I started thinking, this expertise works both ways. That is, business expertise is used to get its way, and other groups use expertise, and it's often misused. It's misused even when it's done with good intention, if for no other reason than the hubris of the expert. Of course, some of you might be questioning my own expertise after you hear my talk. Oh, and I should say, that's probably the only humorous thing I'll say. I cannot compete with some of the people. So I started out going back to some old work that I did on the question of primitive accumulation. Primitive accumulation was the dispossession of people off the land to make way for the export of wool, which required less labor than using farmers and then trying to extract the grain. It was a very violent process and a very traumatic process for many people.
It was easier to tax them too because you knew where the sheep were going.
Okay, I'll try to talk louder. Keep me informed, because my voice does tend to drop off.
Okay.
The most cruel part of the process of what Marx called primitive accumulation was the game law. All of the laws belonged to the king, and the king gave the right to hunt to the aristocrats, and we all know about Robin Hood, the movie of which was shot in Chico. It's true. The game laws were incredibly cruel. It was considered a capital offense to own a dog. It was considered a capital offense for a person to give a welcome to somebody who was under suspicion of blackening his face at night or owning a dog. It's true there weren't that many executions, but many, many people were sent to Australia. I don't know if that's a punishment or a reward. What's interesting about primitive accumulation is that the only economist to mention in his public work was Adam Smith. And he has dismissed it. He says that's the foolishness of the aristocrats. In their private work, the classical political economists were pretty positive about it. They saw it as a means of progress. One of the most clearest proponents of this was Lawrence Franklin, Nassau Senior.
And his son, too.
I take it next year's session will be devoted to that.
That's humor, Michael.
I'm so humorless, I cannot recognize it. So, then I went out, I started looking at monetary policy. Here's, we'll totally disagree with all of this, I'm sure. I wrote about some of the rhetoric regarding Volcker's 1979 austerity policy. And it was interesting. Volcker went to the Wall Street Journal. Let me see if I can. To get the quote here. The quote was something. He met with the Wall Street Journal's associate editor and the opinion page editor, and he told them, "Will you support me? There'll be blood in the street. There'll be blood in the street." And then later, after all this was through, Michael Moose wrote another statement, again referring to the blood associated. I can look it up on the tablet, it'll take me 2 minutes. It's a very dramatic statement. And it was clear what they were doing, their major concern. Well, Volcker went around with a little card in his pocket, and he would take it out to remind himself of when the next labor negotiation was coming up, in order that they can make sure that monetary policy will be tight, in order that General Motors and U.S. Steel will make the right decision, not let wages go up. And Volcker was very, very clear in terms of saying that since consumption is 2/3 of the economy, holding inflation is key to keeping the wages down. Nothing was said about Humphrey Hawkins Act and full employment or anything like that. And what we know is when there is high unemployment, what you see is a lot of negative consequences, a lot of homicides, suicides, heart attacks, strokes, divorce. Every negative consequence you get occurs with high unemployment. So I looked at the monetary policy. Now, in terms of Latin America, inflation was seen as a matter of power. The monetary theory that I understood to be common in Latin America was one in which inflation was when the government lacked the power because it was faced with a strong business community and a strong labor community, and so they let inflation go. So I don't know about that. And then I looked over and I saw in terms of price theory. Now, one of the things that went on in the middle of the 19th century was that the great American economists were all educated in Germany. And they started the American Economic Association because they were not supporting traditional, conventional microeconomic theory. And what was driving them was two things. One, that education was similar to the education of Karl Marx. And in fact, at one point, Arthur Hadley wrote a letter in which he said, I deplore this man's politics, but his method makes great sense. Arthur Hadley, president of Yale, president of the American Economic Association, and then finally working with the Actions of People Santa Fe. Now, what was driving them to oppose the traditional price theory was what they saw in the railroad industry. So my understanding of what was going on in the late 19th century is a little bit different from Germany's. And of course, these things can't be proven one way or another. But my feeling is what I saw was that, well, let me back off. There's an advertisement by one of the railroad companies that comes in on NPR, and they talk about taking a ton of freight, 400 miles on a gallon of fuel. And what I was saying was that the marginal cost of railroad was very small. They were a quasi-public good. And as a quasi-public good, competition was driving them into bankruptcy. And they were going bankrupt over and over and over. In fact, in A Christmas Carol, some of you might recall Scrooge's first dream. What was it? He had bought American Railway Bond. Because if you're going to have prices set to market cost, then you'll see disaster. You see it in the airlines today. And the way the airlines get around it is they fly most of their fleet in the deserts of Southern California and Arizona. And that way they can have full capacity, and there's no question about lowering prices to fill that extra seat. Gets smaller and smaller. So there was this intense competition, and the railroads are going bankrupt. And there was a young man whose father represented English bondholders. His name was Julius Morgan. And his son, J.P. Morgan, would go to the railroad and say, "You idiots. You compete for individual advantage, and at the same time, you're cutting your own throat. You've got to do something different. You have to agree not to compete." Okay, they agree, and then one says, I can get a little bit more. And the whole thing starts over and over again. So Morgan says, enough. He goes to the railroad and says, look, I can destroy you, but instead I'm going to buy you out. And he started consolidating the railroad. And then Andrew Carnegie. Now, Carnegie was a very interesting character. It's very contradictory. He's making all these plates with the Spanish-American warships, and at the same time he's leading the anti-imperialist league. I can't figure Andrew Carnegie out, except he wants money. And he was going to build a railroad line to take coal from Tennessee up to Pittsburgh. Morgan was for it. There began U.S. Steel. But he didn't want corporate competition. And because he didn't want competition, creates U.S. Steel, and this starts a great merger wave, which used to be described as Morganization, in order to avoid competition. And then what happened was, when he takes over these companies, since they don't have competition, they don't innovate. I grew up near Youngstown, Ohio. And when it snowed, it would snow, and the snow would be white for about an hour, and then it started to gray. The steel mills near where I grew up were all built before World War I, and some of them were built in the 19th century. And of course, they couldn't compete. And by the 1930s, Fortune magazine is describing U.S. Steel as a company run more like a bank than an industry. In fact, they put a banker theory to be to have U.S. Steel. So one of the lessons you get from looking at the 19th century in terms of power is that we think of competition as good and depression as bad. Really, no, the depression is nothing more than the intensification of competition. And that's why you get enormous productivity gains during depression, or even what's called the Great Recession, with the economy in bad shape as it is. And so you see huge productivity gains. So here we see another kind of power. That the corporations were able to use their power, the power of consolidation, to avoid competition, which we say is the key element of market economy. Now, corporations also band together in simply because of a co-respective competition. They band together, and by banding together, they're able to use their power against suppliers, against consumers, in order to raise profits. Again, an incidence of power being used in the economy. We see power in all sorts of ways. When Dodd-Frank was going to reduce the swipe fees for merchants, some of the bankers started to put on other fees. And the response from Bank of America was, well, we have to maintain our profit rate. Like it is a God-given right. So we will extract it. And you see fees occurring all over. Fees are generally, to my mind, not a payment for a service, but just an extraction. Because I think the airlines, I don't even think they really make money off their baggage fees. I think it costs them. Because their planes are on the ground, longer times, because it takes so long to pack up the passengers and fill up the bay. And the reason Southwest Airlines is supposed to be so profitable is their planes spend less time on the ground than anybody else. So we see power again. And then the question is, why don't we hear it in terms? My freshman economics teacher was Harold Jepson. And some of you people should be furious with him because he's the reason I'm an income major.
That's you, right?
And I wrote an article, I guess a year and a half ago, about George Stigler versus tax efficiency, and I quoted a paper by Alshia and Jepson, in which they said employers don't have any power over workers. The relationship between, I won't be able to get it out to the exact quote, but the idea was the relationship between an employer and an employee is the same as the relationship between me and my grocer. And if I don't like what my grocer does, I just don't buy it. He wrote me a nice letter. I'm sure you remember me from 55 years ago. It was a very nice letter, and that's very nice to say. He was also a very good teacher. And a textbook was finished. But I don't think that was his choice. Freedom is considered to be a joke. I know this only because I remember he was on a street 50 miles away at Michigan State, and some of the professors were sitting around laughing, going down the road to see this joke and laugh at it. Tolerance is not a great quality that is found among the economy. So I wanted to open this up as a discussion. I have lots more in the paper, and I expect to have you.
No, I think I'm going to surprise you. Maybe surprised, Michael, that there's a free market literature that is not inconsistent with what you're presenting about the railroads. This is what I was taught, that they had high fixed costs and low variable costs, which means low market costs, and that they chronically competed, and their attempts to get together failed. Mergers was one response, but the Interstate Commerce Commission was the other response. That's believed to have been passed to control the railroad freight rates, but it was really passed to police the cartels.
I'm close to it. I tend to read Coco's account.
Yeah, Coco.
Yeah, we mentioned it before.
Sure,
which is
yeah.
the point. No, one of the nice things about these meetings is we find so much common ground when we're willing to listen. So when I was listening to Peter talking about Buchanan and his type of goal, to me it sounded like very much like one. I told him that I would possibly become the first Marcel Buchanan.
Well, I mean, I've always thought of public choice as an attempt to incorporate power in non-Marxist ways. So we agree there's power.
That's very good. Anyway, the Coco account, for those who haven't read it.
Trying to conservative.
Yes. His account is that there was a big wave of populism that swept across the Congress. And in response, Interstate Commerce Commission. The railroads opposed it, and what was the name of the Secretary of the Treasury? He was a railroad executive, and he explained to them, the experts, getting back to David's idea, the experts, the only people who would understand what's going on in the railroad would be the railroads. And so what was meant to be a regulatory agency ended up being a protective cartel with government sanction.
That is explained by rent city, captured agents.
Oh, yeah.
I just wanted to say something a little about the steel industry.
About what?
Steel.
Yeah.
They merged it all together, but the cost conditions were not quite the same as the railroads. It didn't have universally defined costs. And what happened is the U.S. Steel lost market share. And this Stigler's earliest were very good at details that. And the problem with U.S. Steel is that the head of the U.S. Steel, he wasn't a finance guy, he was a lawyer. Don't Gary, he's a lawyer, Gary. So his whole strategy was to get along with the government so they don't break up U.S. Steel. And the emphasis in that company went away from innovation and change. Actually, Bethlehem Steel and others market share on it. But I'm just saying, that's and the airlines, I blame George Bush for the airline problems today, because after 9/11, he basically did the same thing the government did to the banks. They did something they could never go broke.
Stigler's umbrella here is very, very good. And you're correct. What they did was they would buy out any potential competitor because they weren't doing the technological change. And eventually they're spending so much money buying this thing out that it becomes less and less profitable.
Well, Gary stopped merging about half of the last one he did was 1980 with the Tennessee Corporation. That was Teddy Roosevelt allowed him to do that. And I'm just saying, part of the problem with U.S. Steel, I think the other steel companies is that they have kind of feeling the government would protect them.
And they did.
But I think the explanation comes from rent seeking. The captured agency theories is one of the many things that
I just wanted to sort of explain why I'm not a Marxist. Because Michael and I go back, sort of about the same period. We were going through all the same issues, and I was extraordinarily interested in Marxism at the time. This was 1970, Columbia riots, everything going on, and so I went to a Marxist group. So this was the Marxist thought group, which was really some of the leading thinkers and everything else. So I listened and sort of, and then I said, sort of, how much of this can I explain from monopoly and monopsony? And they looked at me and said, you clearly, so do not belong here. And essentially, I then left it, because essentially that is how I think economics attempts to explain it. And that's why it moved to rent seeking, which I think is a much better explanation of it than monopoly and monopsony.
Well, we agree on what has to be explained. Right?
So, but that was not allowed as part of the Marxist discussion, that you could put it in that framework.
Not all Marxists are Marxists.
No. No, I don't consider you a Marxist.
Is he Bob Marx or Tom?
Groucho Marx. Chico. Marx says talk about monopoly power, and he talks about the large corporations swallowing the smaller corporations, and was very, very prescient in seeing the evolution of the late 19th century economy in terms of the technical structure.
In terms of what I think Marx really saw that a lot of people did was sort of how finance would be used. He had some wonderful quotes how finance would be used to sort of use that power that I didn't see anywhere else. So when we did the calendar for the AEA, we included that comment, from Marx, that essentially said he predicted everything that was happening there.
And you might be, some of you people might be interested, since I was talking about primitive accumulation, he also spoke about government debt as an important lever of primitive accumulation. So I mentioned before yesterday, the day before, to Sandra, that Marx was the ultimate libertarian. And the difference between Marx and, say, James Buchanan was the route that they wanted to take them. It wasn't a strong state of Marxism. This was an interpretation that came from Stalin, who was very smart, and just like with Adam Smith, you can pick and choose and you build whatever kind of theory you want based on things that Marx is saying. Just as I can write a very good Marxist book based completely on Adam Smith. So, yeah, you have a problem with that. I don't think that's Marxism. That's Marxism.
No, I wasn't saying that was Marxism. I was saying it was structure, it was the institutional structure. It's why it didn't become one. Because the institutional structure, I think, is important. Whether a position is open to many different views. And what I really like about this group is it seems to be open to a wide amount of views. And that's why, I'm very happy to be involved with this.
I just want to mention that you mentioned the founding of the American Economic Association. Well, the AEA was founded on the principles of the social gospel, and originally one of the not only founding members but life member, one of the few life members, was Andrew Carnegie. So it's been interesting.
I did know Carnegie, but the literature I've read by the participant was not so much social gospel. That would be John Bates Clark. Pardon?
Richard E.
Yeah.
Richard E. Yes. But many of the other participants, especially Hadley, who was a railroad economist, would be another way of looking at it.
Well, Ely explicitly stated that it's founded on principles of social gospel.
No, I understand that. But I don't think that was the major thing. They wanted to create a new kind of economics. And a new kind of economics, again, the social gospel is looking at a more holistic way of seeing the economy, which was very much in line with the German tradition. So there's not that big a gap between what you're saying and what I'm saying. Oh, I apologize for that. I must have done something wrong because I've never heard a question before.
I'm not my right. I must have done
Who's
something.
question?
Ursula.
Another German strategist besides Marx, of course. And it comes from the engineers. In 1885, William Lampard wrote a book, it's called The Foundations of Mathematical Economics. And his chief example was railroads. And he simply looked for the pricing rules that railroads would use. And very much to the disappointment of some economists, he did not come up with a marginal pricing rule, but something like an average costing rule. But then he pointed out a rent argument that if a line of railroads is built, then the pieces of land next to the line become more valuable because marketplaces can develop. So he also developed pricing rules. There are two railroads, so these solutions were in space, location solutions. Okay, that's one strand. And the other one is Wagner's law, not Richard. I didn't know the first name. Right. Adolf Wagner. Wagner's law. The guy who said with an increase of the tasks of the state, not the expenditures, but the tasks of the state will increase. And his argument was if there are huge expenditures in a state, then this justifies for the state to intervene. This justifies regulation. And railroads were one of his arguments because that's a huge expenditure.
That's so unfair. Give me that damn I don't want to disappoint the only other Marxian in the room. So I do have a question, but I know it's going to sound very naive. I don't quite understand what this has to do with power. I think the idea is that different parties want to pursue their interests. Sometimes they do it by outcompeting other ones. You didn't mention the oil industry, but that might be one in which that happened a lot with the Rockefeller enterprises. They might want to out-legislate others, as happens with the ICC and with Davis-Bacon Act that was mentioned before, and or they might just want to take stuff from others. Maybe as Mark talks about with the taking the commons, but I wouldn't think it's a Marxian theory unless you can say something about not just everybody being in the game symmetrically, but what you started with, when you said you don't think Walmart would negotiate with me to replace the dumping stocks. I think they probably would, because I'm a philosopher. I don't have many alternatives. I'll sell out my shack for toxic waste. Whereas I don't know if you've ever seen Sandy's house, but it would cost so much, even with all the spacious they want me for that. So why? Obviously there are differences in power of all three kinds, but why isn't this the same sort of competitive phenomenon? No, I'm not going to give this back. You never give it. No, I'm sorry, I'm being bad. But I enjoy it.
Come back. Do you want to come back?
Okay, there were a couple things. First was Warren didn't see why it was Marxist theory. And I wasn't speaking in terms of Marxist theory. I'm a Marxist, but I can also speak in terms of common sense. More humor. And at the same time, the idea, when I talked about the power of economics versus the economics of power, the point was that we don't hear about power in conventional economics. I haven't read enough of public choice to be able to make a statement whether they talk about it or not. Oh, by the way, in public choice, you know a person named Joseph Coffey? Then it's sort of why we leave graduate school, because there was a class in agricultural policy, and I was the only one to think of a policy that would raise income for farmers without hurting the economy, but he was offended that I proposed legalization of marijuana. I was going to try to get me out of grad school. And I thought it was part of the public choice community. Okay, no, it wasn't part of it, but it was saying, why doesn't conventional economics talk more about power? Why is it left out of theory? The talk I heard about Buchanan was saying, okay, I'll make up rules that will get people to behave correctly, but they don't behave correctly. And they get to use and abuse power, and we don't see that described much in the economic literature, correct?
He's got it now.
Yeah.
He's over
Do
here.
you want to be on the queue? Did you want to be on the queue?
I was just going to mention something on there.
Okay.
I think your question about why power is missing from mainline economics is just fabulous.
Is what?
It's fabulous. It's a fabulous point. And we ran into power in a sort of odd place that we got asked to do the Albright's entry on the calculation of it. I thought it would take us a week. Doing real good, on day 5, we ran into Walter White again. Okay, 6 months later, the article got sent off the journal. Okay, so the guy, I hadn't known Oyken when I'd read the stuff before, but Oyken's argument is all in the space of power. And that at the same time this was going on, Buchanan was telling us that we really should have people who talk about the ordo tradition. And so it's very sad, very unfortunate, our 2 young ordo scholars are both hurt, and not able to be here this year. But it is Walter Oyken, I think, in the larger economic tradition, and those are the larger neoclassical economic tradition who works in the space of power. And I think that, so the question of why don't economists in the sort of the mainline tradition or the general tradition pay much attention to power is maybe related to the question is why people don't read Oyken, why Oyken was in danger of being thrown out of all grades, even though he's one of the few economists who's on a postage stamp. Right? There's a Walter Oyken stamp. He's in some sense terribly important, but he's in danger of being forgotten. And I think that, and it may very well be because he works in power the way that no one else does. And that maybe that's a way in. It's looking at not so much public choice, but maybe looking at the sort of the ordo stuff as a way to think about power. I thought your question is just fabulous. Why don't we do this?
Let me respond. The person I hold most responsible is Adam Smith. Because Adam Smith said, in effect, look at the transaction. Transactions are by themselves a voluntary relationship. And even if I don't want to take a minimum wage job at Walmart, I have no other choice, I take the job. So I'm not forced to do anything. So there's no force, there's no power in an economy just based truly on voluntary transactions. And I think that's a serious problem.
Michael, thank you for that talk. And going back to that question about why economics doesn't take properly into account power, I think it's because economics, in a certain way, the tools, mainstream economics, cannot take seriously all the historical, students that you were, started to study, like discrimination, discrimination. And in that sense, I think that Marxian analysis is powerful because it allows you to understand these historical events in the dialectical method. So, and I just wanted to comment, basically, probably you know about the work of Michael Mann, who's, studying all these sources of social power, and how, there are all these, the definition that he gives of society is not for the total and closed social system, like economics, I think, like we did. We pretty much talked about the interrelationships and networks, which go away, also in relation to this, class structure and distribution, it's like what determines what to produce and how distribution gets implemented. So that, my opinion.
All that is actually.
struck by complaints of power as if it's aligning. And I don't mean that in any disrespect. Klein, Crawford, and Alshin have a great paper dealing with appropriate quasi-grants. And there's a certain reality in that paper. And it's a reality in the marketplace. We are not all equal. And in our ability to negotiate, we have to accept the terms that are ahead of us and presented to us. Per diem is not something that we can go out and do every day. We have to take what opportunity is given us. And in that sense, there will always be somebody else who's more powerful across the table from us. There's nothing we can do about it.
Or there is.
No revolution.
I didn't say it.
We lose.
You hear that, understand?
So your question is, why isn't there more talk in economics about power? Well, the fact is there is a very large literature in economics about power. So for instance, if you're searching for bargaining 3 or 4, you'll find a very large literature on that. There's also, you're starting with coast. There's a paper by Asimov called Why There Isn't a Political Coast Theory, which addresses exactly the problem that you addressed. There's also Hirschleifer. He has 2 books on power. One is called Economics University, and another one is called The Dark Side of the Force. So, okay, and then there's all the literature on power, like starting with the strategy of conflict. Strategy of conflict. So then there is Pollock with the social dilemma. So there is a very, very large literature. So the bargaining theory of the war and Hirschleifer, they're just the last couple of houses.
Like in the introductory textbook, it doesn't fit.
Doesn't mind.
But you check it out, put it in the ISL, put it in the ISL. I mean, the aggregate supply.
Oh, okay. There, I check it out. But that would have cost me $150,000.
Opportunity.
And Michael, you asked why it is on that, you asked why it is that you don't see power in the introductory text. Remember that one assumption that's being made there is that market participants for the most part are kind of all equal, you know? Yeah, they're all equal. I mean, all of those competitors in the competitive market, you know, the representative firm with the cost curves, all of them are the same. Well, if all of them are the same, then how do you bring power into it? So I think the methodology that's being used there does not lend itself easily to discussions of power.
Thank you. I agree. I expected more. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to vent Adam Smith for a moment.
For the show.
I think that Maria's paper yesterday actually quoted some material about the power of the employer class in sort of being able to influence in their favor the legislative process. And the whole mercantile system in Smith would be an example of the symbiotic relationship between economic and political power, which he's trying to dismantle. But even outside of that, with respect to the labor market and the wage market, he begins by setting it up as a power relationship between employer and employee. And he also talks about the possibility of legislation helping to redress the imbalance of power between employer and employee. And I think the reason why eventually sort of power
famous article by William Bowell, in which he has the Marx clothes and the Smith clothes side by side. I agree. But again, like Wiener had said something to the effect of, find whatever you want in Smith and you can find a refutation a few chapters later. So it's very difficult to speak holistically about Smith because there really is so many things going on. I mean, how is the person in favor of having no regulation of doctors but having the state regulate clergy? I can't make sense of it.
It's more dangerous.
More dangerous.
Well,
You didn't know about economists.
doctors weren't much better than clergymen. Doing anything in those days anyway.
At the end of my queue, Michael, this has been wonderful. I think only at the Summer Institute could you find Michael Perelman and Gerald